interested to hear about from you is something that's a topic quite interesting just for today, because we are the 8th of May. Now, the 8th of May is V-Day in Europe, so the end of World War II. And
Right.
as you've said, you've been through 2 world wars and survived, but obviously the Champagne region has come out stronger than before. So what I really appreciate about you, Champenois, Antoine, is that you are some of the most resilient people in the world. Now, there have been battles throughout the Champagne region, from the Battle of Chalon, which was Attila the Hun in 451 against the Romans, all the way up until today. And no other area in the world has really come out as strong. So what I'm really interested to find out about you is, how was everything under the Nazi occupation of Champagne, so 1940 to 1944, and how did Billecart survive that and essentially combat the Weinführers, so the essentially the people who were sent to Champagne and also to Bordeaux and Burgundy to essentially take all of your best wine. Tell me about that.
Well, first of all, it was quite well organized, I would say. In World War II, the German, first of all, you have to understand that the German, they like Champagne. They always loved Champagne, and they thought, of course, in 1939 when it started. 1939 was, let's say, like my father say, the little war prior to get more serious. It got more serious in 40. But it was quite well organized. In 39, most of the village, 90% of the village escaped and went south of France because they had to. The government at the time said, no, you guys, you don't stay, you just move, you don't remain in the area. And my grandfather at the time was in charge of the village, as what we call the maire. Then he had to go. Then my family, my grandmother, with the 7 kids, they left for west of France in a small village called Port-Blanc. Port-Blanc is on the north coast of in what we call Côte d'Armor now. It's not too far from Tréguier. It's not too far from this area, Paimpol. So all the family left there, and until 1940. So which means that during those two years, the house was closed properly. But as my grandfather was in charge of the village, he had to go back to the village. And what a surprise when he got back to the village. The entire house was occupied with the army. Germans was living in the house. His room was busy.
Wow.
So he had to go. He had to sleep somewhere else. He found a small place in the house but then the house was occupied for basically at least 2 years by the German, and they were already starting to pump out bottles in the cellar and ship bottles, like in Germany, like all the places, all the cities, all the major places occupied by German, they were shipping champagne. And that's how a lot of brands started to complain to the German headquarters in Champagne, and the Germans said, well, okay, we have to organize this. And they sent someone from Mosel, a German, called Köblich. And that guy organized Champagne, and that's how was created what we call le Bureau du Champagne. And who became after the CIVC, Comité Champagne. But initially, the Bureau du Champagne was founded by Robert de Vogüé, who was in charge was working in Champagne and specifically more for Moët et Chandon. But my grandfather as well was number 3 of this organization, in charge of different things. So my grandfather came back in 1940, and you have to understand that they kept enough. The German kept enough workers and staff in Champagne to take care of the vines, to do the harvest, to organize things until liberation in 45. So, but the activity was very slow because at the time maybe we were selling on a year base 250,000 bottles on a year base. It was basically nothing. We were selling most of our wine in France, a little bit in Belgium, a little bit in England, and even in somehow we were selling as well in Germany. But then it had to be completely reorganized, because the rule was saying that every brand had to supply the German at least 75% of its production.
Wow, 75%.
Yes,
was taken.
75% of the production had to be supplied to the German, invoiced. So hard to believe that it was being to get paid straight. But the story says that when my grandfather got back, in 40, so he caught some Germans loading trucks of champagne, and already in a few days he realized that over 20,000 bottles had disappeared. So he went to complain and to the local German government and said, look, it's not the way. So even with the German, they came back to the winery and reprotect the winery, and that's how the Bureau du Champagne started to reorganize. Basically, World War II was not the most difficult, I think, period. It was a bit tricky.
Compared to World War I, where almost 50% of the vineyards were destroyed, I think World War II was a lot more, the battles weren't so much in Champagne, it went a lot faster through the region.
It went a lot faster through, so the German came through. One story in 1939 that my dad said he heard some noise, very strange noise in the street, and when he opened the door, what a surprise, a German tank was right in front of him in the street.
Wow.
So he closed the door back, and he went to see his father and said, look what's in the street. And on that day they left. So it was it was a bit scary, of course. But basically the German wanted to organize properly the Champagne production and the Champagne region in terms of organization, because I think that they thought they were going to be home for a long time. And that's why they wanted to make sure that the production was going to be well kept, and the vines as well kept. Back to Billecart-Salmon, as I mentioned, we were selling producing around 200,000 bottles And the German organized as well was the organization said, you know, you are limited in the production of 200,000 bottles, and you are going to have the opportunity to get the equivalent of your production in grape to replace what you effectively produce and sell. So it was very ruled and organized. And then the Bureau du Champagne was supplying the headquarters of the German headquarters with the right numbers to give the brand the authorization to purchase grape. You could not buy grape without any authorization. And that was very strictly organized and very strictly ruled at the time by the Bureau du Champagne. And even my grandfather, Charles, so the fourth generation, was in charge at that time of the attribution of the grape to others. So it was very, it was very, and then it took a while to recover from World War II. My father, Jean, in 1940, no, sorry, I'm confusing. In 1943, was sent in Berlin to work as a worker in a factory. He was working in a factory in Berlin as what we call STO, which is mean obligatory worker. And my grandfather said went to the Bureau du Champagne and said, hey, look, you know, he's my son. He's the one who is going to normally take care of the winery. I'm getting gold, blah, 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 blah. He said, no. The best thing, you know what? He will be much better in Germany working in Berlin than acting in the war. So that, on a strategic point of view, the guy was right anyway.
Makes sense.
So yes, and then he went to Berlin. That's how he got fan of Wagner, as he was very living very close of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra, and at the time the conductor was already Herbert von Karajan. So he had the opportunity to go very often to different concerts. And then in 1945, after Liberation, he came back, and then it took a long period of time for him to go, because no train, all the railway were destroyed, a lot of bridges were bombed, most of the roads were not even, no cars, so he was using horses, bicycle, foot. It took him a long time to go back, and then the mail was not the mail was not even existing at the time between Germany and France, so it was not even possible for him to write. The phone was not even working. So one day he arrived in the winery, and he saw his father, and both of them, you know, were so surprised that it was just fantastic. It was a great day for them to meet again, you know, and so yes, and at that time, my grandfather almost said, well, you know, it's going to be difficult to start again, even with the reorganization. What do you think? And my dad said, no. We have to keep up with the brand and continue to work Billecart-Salmon as so it took a long time to rebuild stock, because at the time we not even have the 1 million bottles of stock in the cellar, not even. Now it's different.
It seems like there are a lot of houses who similarly to your family, came back from the war and decided that they didn't want to continue in the farms, they didn't want to continue working the land, that they may not have had, you know, that family unit to continue. And I think after the war, there was a series of really horrible vintages, apart from perhaps 47, and a lot of people decided to.
Well, 47 was a very good vintage.
Yes.
You know what? I opened by accident maybe 10 years ago. I found a Magnum in my cellar at my parents. So I have a corner in the cellar of my parents' house, and I don't know why I saw maybe one Magnum was sitting there for a long time, and I had a dinner with some friends, and I said, okay, I'll take that Magnum and we will see what that is. And we were doing at that time blind tasting, you know, blind. So not to know what we were having. But anyway, when I opened the Magnum, I looked at the cork and I went like, oh shit.
Wow.
It's 47. And that was great. They were great wine. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah.
Particularly in Magnum, I can imagine that would be incredible. That would be such an amazing experience.
Still active, still fizzy. I'm talking about that. That was maybe in 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
So 10 years ago. Yeah, maybe. Good souvenir. Always remember that one.
Yeah. Do you have many bottles from that era? Anything left from the Second World War or the First World War in the cellars? I understand that a lot of the this Otto Klebisch Weinführer requested that a lot of the champagne bottles be labelled with wine for the Führer, and before they're sent back to Germany. Do you have any bottles from that stage, and were you forced to put that labelling on Billecart?
Yes, we were. At the time we were, but at the time, you know, economically it was quite difficult. So my father always said, you know, your grandfather, talking about a vintage, he wanted to sell every single bottle. And not to keep, as we do like now with different library, private sellers, and so on. At the time when you were producing a vintage, and if it was good, if you were producing, I don't know, 5,000 Magnums, just make sure you sell those 5,000. So we don't have a lot of we have some bottles, but it was not in the culture to keep a lot of vintage as in a library in the cellar. Most of the time say, no, do we still have 12 bottles? Can we sell those 12 bottles? Bling, and let them go. So yeah, we don't have a lot of stock in terms of back to that period. I mean, we have a little bit of, let's say, yes, we have 47, we have 49, we have 55, of course, 59. You know, 59 was a very nice vintage as we won that tasting, organized in 1999. So 59 and 61 came first and second. So we have a few things, but not really big. We started to rebuild, we started to keep more from, let's say, the early 80s, so which is quite recent.
Yeah. Or perhaps there is a cellar that is walled up somewhere with some secret bottles that is yet to be discovered.
There are a few cellars. There are a cellar, particularly one, where there are like a metal cage in that cellar. And when I asked my dad, I said, you know what that is? Well, I think your grandfather was a very good friend with DRC. So apparently there is DRC from 23 DRC bottles, DRC from yes, from 23, 20, 27, you know, some
Wow.
few bottles.
Just some nice little bottles laying around.
Yeah.
That's it.